A continuación, nos complace presentarles al señor Prashant Kapoor, el cual cuenta con más de 15 años de experiencia en la entrega de soluciones sostenibles en el entorno construido a través de los sectores públicos y comerciales. Como especialista de la industria con sede en Washington, D.C., él guía las inversiones de construcción verde globales del IFC en los países en desarrollo con un enfoque particular sobre el financiamiento de desarrollos de bajo carbono, materiales de construcción sostenible, ESCOs y las hipotecas verdes. El señor Prashant nos hablará sobre los fondos internacionales para edificaciones de alto desempeño.
I hope to sort of talk to you a little bit about what the World Bank IFC is doing and thinking about in this green building space, and why we're here as well, and what we see from our perspective as the need for this, really. So I've structured it in a way to kind of communicate, firstly, a little bit of experience that we have had in this space, to share our perspective in this space, but also talk about what we see as the opportunities, the barriers, and perhaps some of the solutions that we could offer to the market. It's a slightly different dimension from the other two speakers, so I hope this is useful. Just briefly, if you don't know who IFC is, it is an arm of the World Bank that invests in private sector developers, banks, and those kind of clients. And we provide two services, typically. We're a development agency that uses our investment to reduce, to improve development in various emerging countries, but also the advisory package, which is basically advice to our clients and governments in some of the cases. Our green building experience has been fairly recent, I would say 3-4 years, really, but it's been rapid in terms of once we focused on it. One of the key things we found was that although we were interested in sort of focusing on this from an investment perspective, there weren't actually that many buildings, especially in emerging countries, to kind of obviously go and find. I mean, for the size of India, they only have 400 lead projects. I mean, size of Brazil, so it's still early days for us to use an existing platform to quickly identify clients to go for once we focused on green building. So we had to internally define, what does green building mean to us? How do we make this a sensible choice? And I'll explain that a little later. But first of all, we had to start with thinking, okay, what do we want from these buildings from our perspective? We wanted to deal with climate change, we wanted to deal with resource efficiency and reduce costs for our clients. That was the main focus. So we said, okay, if a project has at least 20% energy efficiency or a LEED or an equivalent certificate, we would accept that for our investment. So these are some of our investments in the recent years. We do currently about $500 million a year in developers and banks in this space, and we're looking to ramp this up even more. On the advisory side, we also provide advice to both the central government and the state government on building codes. This was a great study Russell and I worked on, where a lot of the countries, including Mexico, India, have building energy efficiency codes, but they aren't necessarily that easy to implement. They have been based on American ASHRAE or the European SIPSI standards, and they're not that easy. They're sort of 20 pages. They've been there since 2003 in Mexico, 2006 in India, and these guys also had it. What we wanted to do is bring a slightly different perspective by actually looking at what are the options practically, what can be inspected by a building and control inspector, in terms of energy efficiency. And this is just for offices. I just want to give you a sample of our kind of work. You can reduce the amount of glass, you can have solar shading, you can add insulation and those sort of things. How much would it save in terms of energy? Is it even worth doing it? Because a lot of these codes had things like variable speed drives, although they're good to have, energy efficient elevators, but they are, they're going to save you like 0.1% of the total energy cost. Okay, it's not that it's not good, but is it really where a country or a city starts with in terms of a regulatory mechanism? So, and we also found interesting things like there are sort of preconceived ideas of what a green building is. For example, if I can point this here, you can see wall insulation here takes 100 years in Jakarta to pay itself back. The reason is that a lot of our thinking comes from temperate climates, but when you go to the equatorial climates, it's the sun that's the problem, not the temperature. It's the humidity, it's the sun. Okay, so having excessive glass, reducing the amount of glass really helps. Okay, you can see that actually it has a negative payback. Glass is more expensive than a wall, you know. So there are those kind of things that we figured out, and we sort of distilled it down to say 5 things one can do that would be easy to implement and easy to check, so that there's less likelihood of corruption or any other sort of issues when it comes to building control. So that's one way that we have been working in the market. Just quickly. Wanted to share some of the other experience we've had. We've been supporting developers all across the world. This is a great example of, I don't know if you've heard of these guys. They are Mexican-based developers. We've done a lot of investments in Mexico in the green building space. But these guys started to provide, solar hot water, simple things, 5 things: solar hot water, better showers, dual flush toilets, and they found that yes, it does cost more. It costs about $1,000, $2,000 more. But after they hit 500 homes a year rate of including these things in their properties, they found that the cost that they saved in terms of borrowing cost of money, because the homes are flying off the shelf faster, the savings there in terms of reduced cost of borrowing was more than the cost of what you would add to these buildings. And that was an interesting idea. We hadn't conceived, because one of the key challenges, and I'll come to challenges and barriers here, but this was an interesting concept. You have to kind of work out, once you've got your system sorted out, then the actual cost of those products isn't that high once you get the design right. Another example, using our 20-20-20 energy efficiency standard, we said, this is a project in Ghana, and I'm particularly proud of this one because, in Africa, again, the same kind of climate, we wanted to make sure that these buildings were healthy, yes, but also naturally ventilated. And this building is only 15 meters wide. You could open windows on either side and not have the glare, because a lot of the glass buildings today have excessive amount of glare. So although you might have fantastic views, I mean, Bill, I'm looking, where are you? You don't really have, you have the blinds down most of the times, because in the tropics, the amount of glare that you feel and the psychological impact of that is pretty high too, especially in these days of computers. So we worked with the architects to kind of see if you could have better shading, openable windows, simple things like that, daylight and managing those with photoelectric controls really provide significant saving here. We invest in sort of business hotels across the world. When I say that, 3 to 4 star hotels. And these guys really sort of wanted to scale it up. They do, we started off with about 10 hotels initially. And then now they're all across, they're in Costa Rica. This is a Mexican chain again, expanding. And they embodied this energy efficiency because it's a business hotel, they really needed to save money. And they took the basic principles of energy efficiency and water efficiency and applied it across. We also found that some of our developers wanted us to kind of give them some reassurance that this is green. They found that cost of doing LEED, for example, was too expensive in Mexico for a business hotel. I think, and I'll try and tackle those issues too. If it's $100,000, that is a significant amount of money for the whole process that they could have invested in the property to make it energy efficient in the first place. So we felt that actually focusing them on resource efficiency measures really helped us communicate to them and get their buy-in. This is a project where we're working with the bank. We've invested in Kenya and now in India too, where we work with the bank and say, look, if you do these set of energy efficiency measures and make sure that your mortgage, the homes that have mortgages have these measures, then you can have a slightly better interest rates to offer to these clients. And I'll come to that again. This is another interesting example. And we've also done home retrofits in various parts of Eastern Europe. So I'll stop with examples and happy when we get a chance to meet to kind of explain them in more detail. But the key reason I wanted to stress here is that, yes, green buildings is a great idea, and it tends to make a lot of sense in a lot of countries, in all countries, but it's currently, at least from my understanding in the emerging countries, it's seen as a luxury for the high end of the market. Okay, what does it mean to this lady in Marine? Remember we met her, and you know, so she earns $200 and pays $20, okay, on electricity, right? So 10% of her money, even 20% in some of the cases, goes into paying energy bills. And from our perspective, it is as much about saving energy at the, you know, the bottom end of the market, the middle end of the market, as it is about having, you know, a certificate and a brand for the higher end of the market. And we found that, you know, through our code studies in Colombia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and now we're expanding into China and perhaps India too, is that, you know, the energy efficiency aspects, the water efficiency aspects aren't that expensive. I mean, a lot of times, especially if you control glazing, it can save you money in the long run. In the capital cost. Now, think about this. Most of you know, I think, that these things are fairly obvious, right? Rainwater harvesting, solar hot water, having just basic ceiling fans in the homes. You know, when it comes to residential buildings, and you know, when it comes to commercial buildings, just having better shading, ventilation, insulation, those sort of things. And yet, you get projects like this all across the world. Okay, these are bad imitation of good design done somewhere else. Okay, and then. And I won't mention that, whose building this is. This is our office in Bombay. But you can see all the blinds are down. It's heavily, you know, tinted, so you can barely even use the daylight, never mind, you know. And it gets hot because it absorbs heat. And there's a building next to it which is actually pretty sensible. And this is a rated building and that's not. Okay? So you get this in the market, constant contradiction in the system. And we feel that there are significant barriers in the market. And this is where we feel that collectively as a Green Building Council and us and the greater community should try and sort out. I think all of you would agree you would like to stay in an energy efficient house. Okay? But you say that builders aren't building it. Builders say developers aren't asking for it. And developers say investors aren't really, you know, funding these kind of projects, right? Including banks, for example. And this is the conundrum that we want to sort of help sort, in a sense. The circle of blame that exists in the market may not be in the sort of hospital or a hotel space, but certainly in a speculative space, this is the key issue, we feel. Besides the fact that there are issues with information problem. You know, what is the benchmark for Panama? Is it 200 kilowatt hours per meter square for a Class A building? We don't know yet. I mean, that's the challenge. What are you comparing against as a base case? Now, these are, in my view, some of the key drivers, especially in the housing sector. You know, homeowners want to see lower cost. They want to have more comfortable environment. They would like to do good generally because they realize it. And I think that's true for most of emerging countries. We face the reality of climate change every day, in a sense. And from a builder's perspective, they do want better branding. They want quicker sale, and they want to sort of have longer-term value retention of their properties, because it's actually, in the long run, if your property doesn't really hold value, it's not looking good on your you know, marketing perspective. But there are some significant barriers here. The financial sector still doesn't get it. The sample set of green buildings in emerging countries is too small for them to actually start to kind of make any sort of you know, asset class distinction in the market. Home buyers are not able to figure out, is this really green or not? And I would say that's typical not just for home buyers, for all across the market. There are very few projects that if you want to go for that are actually certified in these markets. And even if you get the certification, you don't know, is this because you got energy efficiency built into it or something else? Cycle racks, for example. That's the challenge in the market as well. And the developers find it difficult to kind of, you know, explain these features to the end customer, right? And the long-term, you know, responsibility is the key issue for developers. They don't want to hold property for as long as it takes. And that's been also the challenge in terms of recouping the capital investment they make in homes and offices. We've seen significant market shift happen very close to you. okay? There are issues with the Mexican market, but there's been some good lessons learned here. One is the Infonavit mortgage product, where we have seen that just in 4 years, from zero, from having nothing green in the housing, to introducing a green mortgage product and testing it in the first year for 10% of the market. And it was so successful that today they do 600,000 homes which are green. In fact, it's so successful they don't offer anything other than green as their main product. And that's 60% of the mortgage market in Mexico transformed in 4 years through one investment channel, if you see what I mean. And we've also seen, and Bill mentioned this, that asset rating, if it's easy to work out, can be articulated, can be tangible. The Californian study shows 8% increase in value of Energy Star rated homes to be higher. We have seen the same results with EPC rating. The reason we are looking at these kind of ratings is that there is a larger penetration, and you need that to start to get results back into the banking financial system. We found that in Netherlands, the A-rated homes had a 3.7% premium, which is very interesting because the cost of getting A is not 3.7% higher. So people are giving more value. Just in sort of the market trend in Europe, and the same results came out for UK recently. What is also interesting for banks is that delinquency rates in the US, including the 2008 crisis, for homes that are energy efficient, Energy Star rated homes have been 33% better. Okay, there's less default rate. That's a great story. We don't know why it is, and I don't think it's purely because of energy efficiency, but there's something that is useful for banks to kind of look at in terms of, are green homes better assets and therefore lower risk? We are working on a system where we think that if we can bring this to the developing countries and really transform it that way, that's really where we are looking at this. If we can come up with simple things that can be articulated and using a certification system that we are trying to promote ourselves, and bring that as a commodity that the banks can start to use in their financial calculations in terms of how much this homeowner is typically going to save, right? Then they're able to potentially offer a larger amount. And we found this barrier in Colombia, right? So low-income housing is defined as homes that are $28,000 and lower. So if a developer wants to do solar hot water in their homes, he's not able to because he cannot go $29,000 because who's going to pay that? He's not going to lose it from his margin. He's not able to increase the value of the house. So those are the sort of challenges that we can try and resolve from the banking perspective. And that could be also in terms of debt to income ratio that one allows for these kind of homes as well. And what we have found is that because you're able to lend, if banks can lend money for energy efficiency, water efficiency, and green features generally over a mortgage amount, say 20, 30 years, it is much better that way rather than expecting a homeowner to buy this as a capital cost investment straight away. Because having to spend $2,000 just when you bought your house and your car is asking too much, right? And once you put your electric heater for heating hot water, the incentive of changing that is very tricky. This is why we are trying to focus at the bulk of the market. And I think there's been great leadership from LEED, BREEAM, and other sort of high-end systems. And they're great for the GEs and the BPs and the large players of the world. But for the mass market, which currently is not being addressed either through regulations, right? Because at least in Europe, you've got regulations pushing upwards. You don't have those kind of pressures in this market. So you really need something that is simple, quick, and affordable, that within, say, $50, $100, you should be able to do this and really get this churned out per house. And that's really where we are focused. I just want to quickly show you the EDGE system itself. So basically, we have a tool that can quickly work out what the opportunities are, energy efficiency opportunities are, what the base case is, how much will the end client save. We've got a standard, which is simple. It's a base case standard. We expect people to go much higher, but at least 20% energy efficiency, we think is the minimum required for green. Okay, same with water and materials. And when I say materials, I mean embodied energy of building materials. And then there's a certification system, and we see this as slightly independent. I mean, we see the tool to be used by academics, whoever else is interested in kind of looking at what is the best opportunity. And the standard itself could be used more broadly. And the certification system, I'll come to that as to how we're looking to introduce this in various countries as we go along. The reason we feel this is important is that once we have the key piece of the puzzle and there is knowledge of in the market, then developers can communicate to home buyers, and brand themselves green. The banks can then offer green construction loans. Then there could be green mortgages specifically targeted to this sector. And we can also play a key role in encouraging this market and transform it. That's how we see this work. This is the tool. Okay, we've got tools specifically made for each market sector. We've got for homes, for offices, for hotels, hospitals, and retail. We are in the sort of beta testing stage of some of these. So we hope to have this out by the end of the year. I just want to show you the simplicity of the tool because of the issue of having the tool here. I just thought it would be better to show you as a screenshot, but it's fairly dynamic. You choose the location you are in, and once you choose the location, you have access to climatic data, monthly temperatures, rainfall patterns, solar radiation, cost of electricity in that city. All of those issues can be fed in. Automatically is loaded. And then income category, because most emerging countries have a wide spread of what a house is. Right, you've got low income, middle income. In Colombia, they have 6 stratas. So having that knowledge is key in understanding what the base case needs to be. Unlike in developed countries, you tend to have a benchmark which is fairly fixed because it's a lot more flatter in terms of assumptions that you put in. And then all you need is some basic information of how many, what is the apartment size, number of bedrooms, number of floors. I can show you that side there is there. And that sort of information, and you can quickly then start to work on a base case. So you can work out what your typical energy consumption is likely to be in terms of your current practice in that city or the country, and then work out choosing these options, and I'll explain them in a little bit more. These options, how you can get 44% saving and actually start to focus on where to get the savings from too. And that includes passive design measures, all of those measures. And this is using a quasi-steady state engine. It's actually doing the calculation. It's not a regression analysis. It's, in the market, there are 2 types of tools like this available. One is a highly prescriptive assumptions-based solution. So, use this much insulation and you'll save 30%. You don't even know 30% of cooling or 30% of the building or, that sort of thing. So there's that end of the market, and then you get really sophisticated models done by really good consultants who do thermodynamics tools for $25,000. And probably after you've got all your drawings done and all the AutoCAD work done, probably fairly at a late stage in the design. We want to fill the gap in the market with using a steady state tool that can actually articulate the benefits of doing these things fairly early. And then you can add more layers as you go along. So, for example, adding shading, how much does it save compared to having better glass? What if I reduce the amount of glass I had? What if I had, reflective paint on my facade? What if I had, ceiling fans in the homes? Those kind of things. What if I had just better chillers in the system? All of those things, including solar hot water, because it has the radiation data in it. This will also help you size approximately what sort of size you would need for a family, including photovoltaics. It can try to kind of give you an idea of how much you would need if you're trying to make it self-sufficient or meet 20% of the demand. That's on the energy. Just one other thing I wanted to mention is that here it gives you the base case expected utility cost. So here, if you can't see it, it says $55 a month. Okay, that's what the customer would say, would pay, and then they're saving about $13 a month. This is important information for banks to kind of get a sense of how much is this customer really going to save, or get an indicative idea of the savings here. This is the energy and water figures. This is the carbon saving, and then you've got the embodied energy saving as well. We've got very simple analysis for water and materials as well. I mean, water is not rocket science at all. But it also tells you where your water consumption is likely to be. Okay, so you know, for example, your flushing is going to have a significant water use, and then you have a choice of measures here. If I went for dual flush system, you know, how much would it reduce, right? If I went for better showers, how much will it reduce? And if you have better showers, it also reduces energy, and therefore it reflects on the energy page too. So it's a bit of a cross fertilization there. And also it has grey water, water recycling, rainwater harvesting. It has rainfall data within it. And finally, the materials part, which I think is fairly new in terms of looking at materials. Rather than look at materials in a qualitative way, here you're looking at the embodied energy of building materials. It is not looking at the location of where it's coming from. I think that's important. But we wanted to at least start getting people to understand what the property of a building material is, because, you know, if you're using bricks, you look at the impact that that has on the project, whereas people tend to be, looking at sort of the facade of the building in terms of making that green, but actually the main energy may actually be in the wall of the building or on the slab of the building. So you can have choices. Adding blast furnace slag and cement, what does it do? How much does it save? If you're adding pulverized fuel ash, how much would it save? If you're using hollow concrete blocks versus dense concrete blocks, this can tell you how much it actually reduces in terms of embodied energy of the building material. And the idea now is to get 20-20-20, and you would get a certificate for each unit in the development that meets that. Okay. So this is my final slide. What is our plan for this? I mean, this is still at the sort of, at our global kind of stage. We are working at a country-by-country level. The reason a lot of us are here is kind of looking at the countries we should sort of prioritize, find partners in these countries, and start to come up with a wider program, because I don't think there's any one solution to this. I think we need the high end of the market to show leadership. And that's what's great about Lean and others, is setting those precedents, driving the interest, because just communicating to the middle sector, they look up to the high end. So you really need the high end to really push the market up. But you need to work with the government to get them aligned, to get their incentives worked up. You need, the developers motivated. You need the pipeline for them to start looking at this. And then finally, you need the banks to really start to work in this market. I mean, Panama is a great place, we feel. 22% of its GDP is in mortgages, so there's a strong financial sector that's driving this forward. And I think this could be a fantastic place to really start using some of our key skills of bringing the financial strength as well as the advisory strength, and having EDGE as the center of that market transformation. Thank you very much.